Hello and welcome to Build and Thrive, the podcast that is dedicated to improving the health and happiness of the construction industry. I am your host, Jennie Armstrong, and before we get started, I'm going to say a big thank you to our sponsors, GKR Scaffolding. So today's episode, I am joined by two guests, and we're going to be talking about something that is an absolute fundamental in working within the construction industry. We're talking about welfare. Now, I know from my experience within construction health and wellbeing, we look at organisations and their approaches to how they're managing health and wellbeing. And if they don't get this bit right, it absolutely negates all of the good work they can do in some of the other space. So I'm really excited about this episode. So I'm going to introduce you to Stu Drinkwater and Andrea White. So Stu, do you just want to say a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our guests?
Sure, thanks, Jenny. Appreciate you having us on the podcast. So my name is Stu Drinkwater, and I'm one of the founders of TAL, which stands for Take a Leak, and it's an initiative to improve the welfare available for mobile workers all across the UK.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Andrea, a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm a fire engineer and a fire risk assessor, and I am delighted to be involved with TAL. I have joined as an investor to some degree, yes.
Brilliant. Well, we can draw on that kind of involvement and why you're so passionate about it as well. So, Stu, do you want to start off just telling us a little bit about the story of TAL, how it came about, and the problems that you're actually trying to solve?
Yeah, of course. So the reason TAL came about is because both me and my founder, Nathan, we have experienced firsthand the issue of being on the road, driving from site to site within the UK, and just not knowing where to get adequate welfare. And Nathan in particular, he's been on the tools for many, many years. I can't take credit for the idea. It was Nathan's idea originally, but it absolutely resonated with me when he mentioned it. And, you know, many people that we work with, we kind of just accept that access to welfare when you're on the road is terrible. And it's kind of mind-boggling that we live in a world where it's just been normalised. And there are these loops where you're traveling around, you need to go to the bathroom, for example, and then, you know, if you're lucky, you might find a cafe, and then you go in there and you feel obliged to buy a cup of coffee, but then you think, oh gosh, I can't drink this coffee because I'll need the toilet again soon. Where am I going to go? And this vicious cycle just perpetuates, really. So that's really how TAL started. And my background is in business and finance, and I've helped startups in the past, but never could have built my own. And Nathan sort of said, well, this is clearly a problem. Could we make it into a business? We did a load of market research. We crunched some numbers, and we went, no, this could help a lot of people and be a viable business. And that's how TAL was born.
Brilliant. So tell us a little bit about kind of a construction worker's experience if they were to use TAL and how that might help them. What their typical day look like, for example?
Yeah, so workers will have access to an app that we've created that works really as a directory of a number of venues that we have in our growing network that provide adequate welfare based on the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. So by that, these are venues that will offer a toilet as an absolute basic, a clean and warm place to sit, clean running water, hot water, and a way to heat up food as well. So these venues can be anything from cafes to restaurants to pubs, community centres, libraries, anywhere that has this welfare available. We get the venue owners to agree to provide that welfare, and that then appears on the app. So the workers, it looks a bit like Google Maps or any other map application. So they see their location, they can see where welfare is in respect to where they currently are. They press a button, it directs them to that welfare. They can then check in, and they are then allowed to use the facilities for up to half an hour at no cost to the worker.
Brilliant. So, and how many kind of venues and people are using it at the moment? Have you got lots of organisations keen to be involved with this?
We've got a lot of organisations keen. We are still a startup, so we're in the early days at the moment. We have 70 venues signed up, which we're very excited about. And actually, just in the last couple of weeks, I've started to hire some new people to expand our network of venues. We have about 60 workers currently using the app, mostly in south of London. But we have recently expanded into Oxford, Reading, Southampton, and across the Midlands. So we are growing very, very quickly. And I think whenever I speak to prospective clients that say, oh, I want my workers to use your app, I've had to turn down some people because they say, oh, we're not actually active there yet, but we absolutely intend to be very, very soon. So it's quite exciting that there's so much interest, and it's just a case of we need to build the team faster so we can roll this out as quickly as possible, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it sounds fascinating. I can imagine when you're having those conversations, it's a bit of a mic drop moment. Like, well, actually, this is a basic thing we should absolutely have access to. But I suppose I'm just thinking, how does it work commercially for those venues? I mean, I've got visions of nice restaurants with lots of construction workers in their PPE, bringing mud in and things like that. So obviously, they want to make some money out of it as well as providing a service, I'm sure.
No, of course. And actually, so there are some conversations with, say, fancy restaurants that say, oh, I don't want lots of construction workers coming in on the weekend when I've got limited seating, and we're charging quite a lot of money per head for meals. So we kind of reiterate that this is often during the weekday when footfall is already quite low for these venues. So it's not like we're taking up space from paying customers in the evenings in that respect. But the way the model works is very simply, when one of the workers checks in at one of these venues, at that point, the employer of that worker will pay about the cost of a cup of coffee. And the majority of that goes to the venue, and we take a small service charge just to maintain the app and the business. So as I say, the venues are not just getting extra footfall, because what we find is a lot of these workers actually go, do you know what? Oh, those donuts smell quite nice, or actually, I will have a cup of coffee, and that's extra revenue for these cafes or these restaurants, these pubs anyway. So they get the flat fee from the worker coming in, whether they buy anything or not, and then extra revenue from them buying food and beverages.
Yeah, brilliant. And I suppose let's come to you, Andrea. I mean, as a fire engineer, it's not something I would naturally put you straight in the world of welfare facilities. But tell us a little bit about how you came to being a supporter and investor of TAL.
Yeah. So I am a fire engineer, but I've also spent most of my 30-year career being a fire risk assessor. And that means I've spent several days every week visiting existing buildings and probably most likely blocks of flats. And in those blocks of flats, there's very, very rarely access to any welfare facilities or a loo for me. So I know what it's like to eat my lunch on the top of the communal staircase, because that's the quietest place, and it's in the dry. And I know what it's like to limit my water intake in the morning so that I don't need the loo as often during the day. But that would mean I'd end up really dehydrated by the time I got back on the train home. So, when I heard about the idea of TAL, it really struck a chord with me based on my own experiences.
Yeah, and I mean, I can even think it from an occupational health perspective, and my kind of nurse hat on in this conversation. And actually, there's people with underlying health conditions that having an access to those facilities, like if you're diabetic, you need to be able to eat properly. If you've got any other health conditions where you need to have access to the toilet more regularly, which is quite a common thing. But not on that level, absolutely these people need to have access to it. But just to be functioning, to be productive, you also need to be able to drink well and go to the toilet and eat the right food. So and I think when I heard about it, it also resonated quite well with me, and some of my experience working even on a major construction site, there's stages in that project which it gets to the end and the welfare facilities reduce and get smaller, and the same problem is still there for projects as well as mobile workers. I suppose, what have you found, Stu, with some of the people you've been engaging with and some of the scenarios that you hear about their current access to getting facilities? I suppose what their solution's been up until you came along.
Yeah. So as I said, me and Nathan did a lot of market research before we decided to actually start the business officially. And we went to numerous events. We got in touch with employers. We spoke to workers on the ground. And time again, the recurring theme was that, we just kind of either don't drink during the day, or we hopefully find a service station, or actually we hear lots of stories of, if I can say it on the podcast, just peeing in bottles or in bushes or in alleyways, and then awkwardly getting caught by someone passing by, and then feeling really ashamed, like, oh gosh, I've just been seen doing this. And Andrew's not touched on this yet, but I mean, we think about the disproportionate effect this has on women in the industries as well. Because, there are a number of guys that say, well, I can pee in a bottle in the back of my van. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. but women don't want to do that. It's a very different story, right?
It'd be very impressive if you could. I'd like to meet those women.
Exactly. So, there's a really interesting cultural shift that needs to happen, because there are a lot of guys in particular that just accept it as the norm, even though they don't like the way it is, but they go, well, what else can we do? And it's interesting, actually, because we heard some stats when we were doing this research, and one was that the average office worker uses the toilet about 4 to 5 times a day, right? Whereas the average mobile worker traveling around uses the toilet on average, can you guess, Jenny?
Once, twice?
Once, yeah. So
once
that
a day.
just once a day. And I think the reason for that is obvious. It's just because, as Andrew was saying, you just don't drink because you don't know when you're going to get to go to the toilet again. And there's no worse feeling than being stuck on the road or in traffic thinking, oh gosh, I'm an hour away from home. What do I do? Right? And let alone there's the dehydration elements to this, which can cause fatigue, tiredness, even like musculoskeletal strain. I'm quite passionate about this. My surname is Drinkwater, so it should be really. That affects productivity. It also affects retention and morale in the business.
Yeah.
And also just like safety from a perspective of, you've got people on the road who are dehydrated, fatigued, not cognitively there necessarily, and so there's also an increased risk of causing accidents on the road. So there's so many knock-on effects to this problem.
Yeah.
I suppose we've just heard lots of welfare nightmare stories, that some of which I definitely can't say on this podcast, but I think I mentioned a couple there already.
And I suppose, what's the feedback from those who are using it at the moment? How do they? What's their kind of perception of how much benefit this is bringing?
Yeah, so the feedback's been really positive so far, both from the workers and the employers' perspective. So the ability to be able to not just have welfare near a site, so say they're working on a social housing contract and there isn't welfare on site, but they can go to places nearby, that's great. But also, even on bigger jobs where there may be welfare on site, there's nothing in between where they live and the site. Whereas with our solution, wherever you go, there's welfare, right? So I'm on the way to work, I can find a place on the way if I'm desperate, or on the way home. The main, I suppose, I don't want to say negative feedback, but constructive feedback is, we also need you in this area, in this area, in this area. When's it going to be rolled out? And it's like, we're trying our best. We're building as quickly as possible. But yeah, the feedback's been great so far.
Yeah, I can imagine, just even if they're not having to use it every single day, knowing that something's there relieves that instant pressure and stress that they might have had when planning their days and how it works. And I suppose for me, Andrew, obviously you shared a little bit about sitting at the top of the stairs having to eat your dinner. Again, kind of coming back to the female position on this, is there anything else that you can relate to, or anything else that you've heard from people's experiences on how this has negatively impacted them, and also the positives that might come from having access to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just when you're looking at a job in the totality, one of the issues, and it's a really fundamental issue, because, we're talking about a basic human right here of being able to relieve yourself.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at your job in the totality, there are things that eventually turn it into the too hard pile, and if I can't actually, look after myself physically and find a loo, in terms of dignity, in terms of physical health, it's a barrier to doing those jobs, I think. And certainly for women in construction, what we really need to be doing is removing the barriers. We certainly don't want to be continuing with existing barriers.
Yeah. I feel like we have moved away from the women's toilets being the storeroom, or the women have to go to the toilet in disabled room on construction projects. But yeah, I think there's still definitely a disproportionate focus on making sure that the facilities are geared up for the men. I suppose what I'm thinking about, and what some of the listeners might be thinking about, well, this is a legal requirement for organisations to provide welfare facilities. I don't know, what's the perception of it, of how it works at the moment? If mobile workers don't have access to it, is that they're not compliant with the law, or is that they managed to get around it slightly by saying, you can use the petrol station or whatever? What's the kind of legal position on it?
So it's a really good question, and it's something that Nathan and I have have reached out to the health and safety executive. So obviously they enforce the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 about this exact problem. And at the moment, HSE kind of acknowledge that there isn't a quote unquote affordable and feasible solution, and therefore certainly for smaller organizations that can't afford welfare vans or portaloos or other kind of static welfare solutions, they sort of say, well, we don't want to impose those fines and penalties because it just makes it much harder for these smaller and medium-sized employers, which I fully understand that, right? But then there have been stories of HSE imposing fines and penalties on employers that really didn't have a robust, I guess, rebuttal to why they weren't providing welfare for their workers. Now, from my perspective, so we exist and we're growing. I would not be surprised if other competitors spring up as well. I'm totally fine with that because my mission is for workers to be supported across the UK, whether it's by us or anyone else, fine. And actually, if enough of us crop up, HSE could easily turn around and go, well, actually, there are multiple feasible and affordable solutions. You have no excuse. Suddenly, employers are going to be pushed into providing at least one of these solutions. And I welcome that world because then we're going to have a lot of much healthier workers across the UK.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I would also say is, we've seen the demise of public conveniences. So I can think of one, next to our little shop in the village, and it's been closed for, golly, over a decade. We just don't seem to have those facilities as readily anymore. So, they did fulfill a function. And now, if we don't have that facility, what are we providing instead?
Yeah. And I imagine, I'm just thinking to some of the organisations we work with, they probably haven't even perceived how much of an issue this is, or the knock-on effect. And yes, the legal, or they can find a way of getting around the legal requirements, saying we've provided access in whatever way that is. But the productivity benefits is huge, and that's showing your care and that ability to look after people. And it's not like we're talking about investing in all these fancy programs that some organisations do. This is just get these little bit basics right, and you might see a huge benefit from it. It'd be great to see some data come out of it in the future when you've got lots of workers using it. I suppose you kind of shared a little bit there, Stu, about what you hope the future to look like, that the mission of it. I mean, how do you see things growing for TAL? I mean, already I'm thinking of other industries, not just construction, how this would benefit. So yeah, what's your thoughts on the kind of the growth and the success for you?
Yeah, so Nathan and I already, like at the very beginning, we had this vision that really excites us, which is for all UK mobile workers to be within 10 minutes of adequate welfare wherever they are in the UK. And that's what we're working towards. And I cannot wait for the point where on our app, you open it up and just there's all these red dots of all these welfare that's available to everyone that needs it. So that's what we're working towards. And I suppose once we've achieved that, I mean, first and foremost, that's going to be an amazing feeling. But lots of people keep asking us, well, this is a problem that isn't unique to the UK. I mean, would you expand into Europe or elsewhere? And actually, the welfare of the UK mobile workforce, that's our main priority. But thinking further into the future, wouldn't that be great if we could turn around and say, look, we've improved the lives of not just the 8 million workers a day in the UK that are on the road, but also however many more millions across Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and those industries, there's probably global organisations that would be able to relate to it. And as you probably see, the UK is slightly better than others. So yeah, big opportunity for it. And I hope to see that, because already, as I said, I can see the huge benefit this would bring. Andrew, let's kind of talk a little bit about the wider inclusion piece. I mean, how do you see the provision of welfare fitting into that bigger picture about inclusion, and it's particularly in the construction industry? And obviously things have got better, but we still have got a long way to go to feel fully inclusive, I suppose. Yeah, what's kind of your experience and your time working in the industry been like?
Yeah, I think for me, something you touched on a couple of minutes ago, there's an opportunity for employers here to differentiate. If I was looking for a job and I knew that it was site-based and this was going to be an issue, if this was explained in the job advert, that would actually differentiate this employer. It would speak volumes. It would mean that, management understood the issues, that those mobile workers were heard. I think it's much bigger than just, the welfare issues. It's about being heard. So certainly in construction, we've got a problem with recruitment. I could see, providing this and promoting that you're providing this as an employer as a real differentiator and selling point if you're looking for people to work for you. I think the other point is that within construction, we're very aware now in terms of women working in the industry of what we call the leaky pipeline. So we do absolutely loads to get women into the industry. But then when you look at retention rates, they're not great, and for me, this sort of issue, this sort of welfare issue, is potentially a reason for that leaky pipeline. So, in terms of retention and recruitment, I think TAL is a great solution to a problem that we just need to start talking more about.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's the British way of not talking about toileting, particularly, which is why people don't bring it up to say I need to get to a toilet. I mean, I think my experience, particularly from a gender bias perspective, there's I have lots of conversations about women in the industry and like what more does the industry need to do, and often my conversations are geared up around like flexibility and working mothers as still being the predominant caregivers in our country, but actually this isn't a topic that I've really ever had those conversations about. So it's not been on my radar, and I imagine, as you say, lots of organisations haven't really reflected. I think that the takeaway, Stu, is that how can they make sure their workers are within 10 minutes of a venue that can provide those facilities, and gives them a bit of a benchmark on, well, actually, are we able to provide that for you? I suppose I think what I'm thinking about now is thinking about some of our audience, and I think if you're a contractor or an organisation with mobile workers, but equally these scenarios, what some of the key actions they could take now, and making sure that they've got the right things in place? I suppose, coming to you, Stu, one of the obvious things would be to sign up and use TAL, but if you're not out working in that area just yet, what are some of the other things that you would recommend that organisations did?
Yeah, I think one of the first recommendations would be to acknowledge that this is an issue, because I think a lot of people have turned a blind eye to it, right? I think from the workers' perspective, if any workers are listening, just have those conversations openly. I know it's not easy, but again, just like raising the fact that it is a problem will over time make employers listen more. And especially if you're genuinely thinking of leaving your work because welfare is an issue, you should tell people that, like, let them know, like, this is why, so that the employers can know that is a problem. And from the employer's perspective, if they're listening to this, have open conversations with your workers about what welfare is available and how the workers are feeling. Like, is it actually affecting morale and retention? And they just haven't been asking the right questions. And as you say, the British way is very much kind of keep calm and carry on. So on all sides, people just go, well, I'll just kind of truck on, I won't talk about it, and then nothing gets resolved. So talking about it really is step one. And then, as you said, Jenny, step two is, of course, reach out to us. We're also offering free trials as well. So, if people are worried about it not working for their teams, we'll let you trial the app for a period of time just to make sure it works for you. And then, our model as well is pay as you go. So we like to think of it as there aren't like these ongoing monthly costs for employers. It's just going to rack up if their workers don't use it. It's like, once your workers have access to our network, if the workers are on projects in certain sites where they're already a static welfare and they don't need TAL, it doesn't cost the employer anything. Simple as that. So I think that's another point to mention. But if anyone listening goes to talservices.co.uk, you can go to our contact form, reach out to us there, get in touch with me and the team. We can allow you to have a free trial and see if it works for you and your workers.
Brilliant. And I suppose as well, and if you're a venue, because I can think of scenarios where there's a few cafes local to me where you see them full at about 10 o'clock in the morning with people having their breakfast. They might be able to make a little bit of extra cash whilst they're there. And same thing, I suppose, get in touch. And is that a simple process for them to sign up as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got an onboarding form. So there's a separate form on the website. So when you go on talservices.co.uk, there's a section that says I'm an employer with workers, a section that says I own a venue. So you click into whichever section is relevant to you. And for venue owners, there is a simple form to register your interest. We do a couple of checks on our side just to make sure it's suitable. So it's not just instantly added. So we do some due diligence. And then if you're suitable, obviously, we add you. There's no costs to venues for signing up either. So completely free. Once you're on the network, you'll appear on the app. And yeah, you'll get increased footfall and extra revenue generation as well.
Sounds a win-win for everyone. I can't see
why. I call it a win-win-win, Jenny, because it's it's a win for employers, a win for workers, a win for venues.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Stu. And I suppose finally, is there any kind of key takeaways that you both have? I mean, Andrea, obviously you're passionate about this as a topic. Is there any kind of final thoughts of anything you'd want to share of, the wider piece around welfare, or any kind of key messages for our listeners?
Yeah, I suppose those who are listening in terms of management, they're probably sitting in an office. And their reality is very different from mobile workers. And so I would really encourage those individuals who are perhaps the decision makers within organisations to go and try it. Go and do 2 or 3 days of mobile working and see how you find it. Because I think sometimes it's great to ask people, to ask those teams of mobile workers, but do they really want to share if they're not convinced that you are, committed to this? So how can you show commitment to them first? I would definitely say take the initiative first.
Yeah, I like that. And Stu, any kind of final thoughts or key messages you want people to take away from today?
Yeah, I think just reiterating what I said earlier about being open to having this conversation. And I appreciate that it's not an easy conversation to have, and that there is a lot that needs to change, and it is going to take some time. But fundamentally, the UK's mobile workforce really is kind of the lifeblood of our country, and I do believe that they deserve better, and that they should be comfortable and healthy and motivated and have dignity. And as Andrea was saying, often us in our kind of offices, or where we can go to the toilet 4 to 5 times a day, we take it for granted, right? So yeah, it's having those conversations and being open to be part of the change for good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any of those leaders, is that them starting that conversation of what Andrea said, and opening it up and making it acceptable to talk about these things. Brilliant. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate you giving us the time, and I really wish all the success for TAL. And Andrea, obviously, it's been great for them to have you really behind it. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, obviously you've mentioned the website, Stu. Is there any other ways? Are you on LinkedIn or any other social media that's a way to follow you?
So we're on LinkedIn as well. If you just search for TAL Services, TL Services, we're also on the usual places like Instagram, Facebook. On the website, there's that contact form. So please do get in touch.
Brilliant. And Andrea, if anyone wants to ask you any more questions about your experiences or more about your role as a fire engineer.
Oh golly. I think
LinkedIn.
Yes. So I am on LinkedIn a lot. So you can find me on LinkedIn by searching for Andrea White Fire Engineer, or it's shown on the image. You can also find me at awfire.co.uk. Yes.
Brilliant. Right. Well, we'll make sure all of the details are in the show notes as well, and all the links to your profiles and your websites. But thank you both again. I really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for listening.